In today's video, I want to share with you guys 5 mistakes to avoid when you first quit smoking weed. If you enjoy the content in today's video, be sure to check out the pinned comment or the video description for a free 80-page PDF on how to quit smoking weed. I also put a bunch of other paid and free resources in the video description and the pinned comment. Tip number 1, the most important tip: under no circumstances do you try and negotiate with that addicted voice in your brain. You are not your addiction. That voice in your head is separate from the voice in your head that wants to quit, the addicted voice. The moment you start to try and rationalize smoking weed one more time, smoking weed in this circumstance, smoking weed with that person or because of this situation, things are going to fall apart. Addiction is a completely irrational process. Nothing about addiction makes any sense whatsoever. Continuing to do something and put yourself through the pain of doing something that you no longer want to be doing anymore is irrational. Why would you ever waste an ounce of energy trying to rationalize with a completely irrational process? Under no circumstances should you find yourself trying to negotiate with that addicted voice. If you can do this, your chances of relapse are almost zero and your chances of success are almost 100%. Tip number 2, don't go off Googling a bunch of stuff and YouTubing a bunch of videos. When you start to compare your journey to other people's journeys, you're going to get ideas and thoughts in your head that may or may not apply to you. This is a major reason why I see people hesitant to quit smoking weed. They think they're going to get horrible withdrawals. They think something really bad is going to happen, and then they start to quit, and something bad actually doesn't happen, and it turns out to be way easier than they thought it was going to be. Or I see the opposite. Someone is struggling 3 days, 2 weeks, 3 months into the quitting process, and they're saying, I should have felt better by now. That YouTube video of Dr. Frank said I should feel better at 90 days. I don't. And because I don't feel better, I'm going to relapse. Don't drive yourself nuts Googling symptoms and Googling videos and overanalyzing the quitting process. The attitude, it is what it is the best attitude you can have when it comes to quitting smoking weed for the first 90 days. Beyond that, comparing yourself to other people is also very, very dangerous. So there's mistake 2 and mistake 3. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't find yourself Googling a bunch of random things. Tip number 4, don't take on too much when you quit smoking weed. Quitting a substance puts your body under a lot of physiological and psychological stress. When I would quit smoking, I would say, okay, I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to work out. I'm going to get all these things accomplished in my business. Although I strongly believe in goal-oriented quitting processes and sobriety processes, I'm a very goal-oriented person. We work with a ton of entrepreneurs and people with professional licensing when it comes to our programs. You don't want to take on too much when you first quit smoking weed, because the chances of this burning you out and making you become overwhelmed is very, very high. And when we become overstressed and overwhelmed in early sobriety, it typically results in relapse. It's okay to set goals. It's okay to have big achievements for your sobriety and recovery process, but just realize Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was this sobriety and recovery process. The decision to quit is a quick decision. It takes nothing. I'm not going to use this substance again. It's actually quite easy. But then seeing that decision through and maintaining that decision is where the challenge actually comes in for a lot of people. So avoid overwhelming yourself and quote unquote burning yourself out by taking on too much. Remember, when you first quit, your body's under enough physiological and psychological stress, especially for the first 2 weeks. So it's expected that your tolerance to handle other things in life would be decreased because all your energy is going into quitting that substance. Fair enough. And tip number 5, avoid trading addictions. I know when I first started quitting smoking weed, I started to convince myself that I was going to be the guy that drank a beer every night with dinner. I was going to be the guy that started smoking cigars. I was going to be the guy that started chewing more tobacco than I was already chewing at the time. I always found myself trading substances. This is a common mistake. And what winds up happening is when you trade one substance for another, often you just wind up continuing to feel like crap. You don't get the sleep that you need. You don't get the recovery that you need. You just don't feel good. And then the person says, well, I quit smoking weed. My life hasn't improved. I don't feel any better physically or mentally, because now maybe they're drinking or watching more porn or consuming nicotine all the time. And then they wind up relapsing on weed. They say quitting wasn't for me. Quitting didn't change my life in any way. It wasn't worth it. This is a very sneaky thing, and it happens a lot. We see this a lot. It happened to me a lot, and it's definitely a mistake that you want to avoid. Don't trade one substance for another substance. Don't trade one addiction for another addiction. The point of quitting, realistically, is to allow your brain the time it needs to go through a dopamine detox. We're trying to reset our dopamine levels. We're trying to reset our serotonin levels. We're trying to rebalance homeostasis in the body. And by introducing other substances into the mix, we're just asking for trouble and we're asking for a relapse. Use those 5 tips. Again, emphasis on tip number 1. Under no circumstances shall you negotiate with that addicted voice. And I think you're going to have a really successful time around this time. Or if this is your first time quitting, hopefully you'll avoid relapse in the future. And if you did relapse and you're watching this video and you don't know what to do, follow me right into the next video or get a copy of that free 80-page PDF I made on quitting smoking weed in the pinned comment or the video description. I'll see you guys in one of those spots.